I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, or good night, depending on where in the world you may be connecting. It's always quite a wonderful thing to realize that we're able, even though we're a small group, that we have such a far reach to be able to connect and share this time. Today, my presentation is entitled Focused Intent, and of course, that's the chapter of day 35 of the Tao of Joy Every Day, and the subtitle I've chosen is The Tao, Our Great Image. So I want to start by going through a review of last week, day 34, the path of life. We talked about how the Tao encompasses everything, including each of our own individual paths. So regardless, every human being is composed of, or comes about because of the Tao, and every human being will return to that. And not only human beings, but just any sentient being, really. And also, too, all the things we see, even that aren't sentient, just material things, eventually, all of those things come from the Tao, and eventually all those things return to the Tao. It's really just a matter of time. And we talked about how it's good to turn inward and ask ourselves where we stand on our life path. And we can do that, of course, by sometimes taking a look at the past and asking ourselves how we arrived at our present path, where we are in the present moment, how was that affected by what transpired in the past to bring us to this moment. And because we can benefit from both our successes and failures, it's a good thing to evaluate the different crossroads we may have encountered in life, and honestly look at the choices we made at the time to help inform our future choices. You can for sure learn from failures, absolutely. As Derek often says, failure sets up success. But also, too, you can learn from successes, from looking at the positive end, the things we did right that yielded good results, how we can repeat that or continue that for the future as well. So there's two aspects there. We can also look to the future to see where the Tao is leading us. We might anticipate obstacles or challenges, and we can prepare by obtaining whatever skills or teachings we need to put into action in order to take the right action to bring those things into fruition. The ultimate goal being peace, balance, and harmony among all sentient beings. And we might ask ourselves as well, what attachments stand in our way? What can we free ourselves of to make sure we're on the right path? And so last week was really sort of about evaluating where we are, and specifically about crossroads. And it's a little bit of a coincidence for me because, as I mentioned last week, I sort of stand at a crossroads myself. And the talk I'm going to give today about focused intent has some really interesting points in it, and one that both in the past of my life and in the present, I can attest to how effective focused intent together with alignment with the Tao itself can it affect your life in ways that are frankly amazing. So I want to jump now into the main part of the presentation, day 35, focused intent. And I've chosen the picture, another fall picture like last week, but this one where the focus is on one leaf itself. And so Derek opens up this chapter with a quote from a book called The Himalayan Expedition, 1951, I believe written by W.H. Murray. And this particular quote, a version of it, exists. It's known as a Goth couplet that was translated by John Auster in 1835. But I like this particular quote from W.H. Murray best because to me, this version of it simplifies it and cuts to the chase. It just this phrase being the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. And essentially, what I plan to get into today is what exactly that means. It's not when you really commit yourself. It means that you've decided to do the thing to do to get to the place where you are committed to go. And that's really what this talk is about. It's about taking that definite commitment, transforming it into action. And when you do that, doors tend to open up. And the reason why that happens really is because the power of the great Tao. It's funny. In some ways, the Tao is so inobtrusive, so subtle, that it's easy to overlook. It's easy to forget about because it encompasses everything. It's kind of like a fish being in water. They're not aware of the water in a sense, but yet it's all around them. And so too is the Tao. It's all around us. Its power is real, but it's not till we align ourselves with it that we often are pretty much it's time tested. Things happen that just shouldn't happen, and some might say couldn't happen. The things that seem impossible all of a sudden become possible. So let me just get into this here. Okay, so once one decides to act and then actually begins taking action to move forward, an interesting thing occurs. So, I mean, the idea, the direction of our lives, the path that we want to, in many ways, because the universe is ultimately meaningless, in my opinion, we're free to inject any meaning we want into it. And once we decide what that meaning is going to be and what the things are that we need to do to move forward, to bring that meaning into the form of realness that we experience in time and space, once we decide to do that, a very interesting thing occurs. And one of the things you'll see, I've seen both in the past of my life and in the present, particularly of late, coincidences tend to abound out of nowhere. And, and not just one coincidence, but many coincidences can pop up in your life and you'll notice them. And it's sort of like a signpost that lets you know you're on the right way to keep going. Now, interesting thing, it takes consistency. I'm sure we've all experienced coincidences in our life, but how often have we been consistent in the approach of living a life of balance, peace, and harmony, and fulfilling our destiny as we see it? I think as I look back at my life, at the times when I've actually been able to do that, the coincidences continue, and help comes from all directions. It's almost like the Tao is creating a world where everyone is working to help you. And in turn, of course, it's just a natural tendency. You'll want to help others as well. And so help can come from completely unexpected persons and places, just out of nowhere, seemingly. Once you've sort of embraced what your destiny is, you set the path in your mind, and then you've actually taken action to take steps on that path toward that. That's where you start to realize that the power of the Tao is not just an intellectual exercise. It's not just something we think about, once a week on Sunday, or when we're reading books about it, or anything like that. In fact, what you discover is it's unexplainable, but the experience of it makes one understand that it is a very real thing. It's not just theory. It actually is something that affects our lives, that has the power to direct our lives. And to me, I think I'm sure as many people in this meeting know exactly what I'm talking about. And maybe there's some who are connecting who haven't yet, but let me tell you, when you actually put the teachings into action, amazing things do happen. Things, insurmountable problems tend to melt, and somehow you find the strength to get through them. It really is an amazing thing. It's one of those things where I almost say to believe it, you have to experience it. You have to do it. But once you've done it and you realize that the power that it has, it becomes a powerful force in your life. So the second quote that Derek brings up in this chapter is from the Tao Te Ching, chapter 35, and that's the beginning phrase of that chapter. Hold the great image, all under heaven will come. And essentially, it's kind of the same way of expressing the sentiment in the earlier quote, just more in a context directly related to the Tao, as these are the words of Lao Tzu himself. So again, it's talking about the power of the great Tao. And the great image, of course, is having a clear idea of what we intend to manifest. And as I said, because the universe is ultimately meaningless, the nice thing about that is we're free to inject what meaning we want to bring to it. And when you do that and you actually take action on it, your destiny can unfold before you, and things really start to come together. So when we hold this image that we manifest in our minds, together with focused intent, we tap into that great power of the Tao. And ultimately, the lesson to remember is that it's action. We have to do something to make it come to fruition. It's not enough to think about it or to wait for something just to magically happen. We have to get things going by taking action ourselves, by starting forward, to move forward. And when that happens, then things open up in a way that, frankly, time and time again in my life, I can say, as I look back at the past, I think of the things that transpired and the difficulties I've had, and I wonder, how did I ever get through that? And then I think about all the ways I got through it. It definitely was through action on my part. I have to take some credit, but also too, there's an invisible power too that comes with it, and I think that's sort of the spiritual side of things. And it really, it's not provable in any way. I can't give you an equation or an experiment that shows that it'll happen. It's something you have to conduct the experiment yourself, with your own life, with your own ideas, with your own goals or things that you want to accomplish. And when you do that, you're conducting your life becomes an experiment in a sense. And believe me, you'll see that it works. And if you know what I'm talking about, but maybe you're in a slump, I encourage you to remember that the same thing that you tapped into in the past is always there. It's just a matter of clearing the mind, being calm, seeing the path ahead of where to go, and actually moving in a direction towards it. And when you do that, the things that you may have tapped into before, you can tap into again. And I think people who cultivate the Tao at a high level are just able to do this all the time. So their lives just have a natural flow. And that for me is a goal to have, to be able to do this all the time. Clearly, so anyone who's not able to do it all the time doesn't get discouraged. It's not an easy thing, but the nice thing is it's always available. It's really up to each one of us as to when we want to start. So when we do this, though, suddenly everything and everyone suddenly comes to our assistance. It's amazing the different things that can happen, usually from completely unconnected sources. Sometimes from that just pop up at a time when you just wouldn't think that they would, and the timing ends up being so perfect that it helps everything sort of fall into place like a jigsaw puzzle coming together to create a beautiful image. And of course, that's the image that we all envisioned at the start. So, and then again, as with the first quote, it's the experience of it that actually reveals it. And so if it hasn't been revealed to you, I encourage you to think about Derek's chapter, Day 35, Focused Intent. I paraphrase most of the time. I think I've only actually read from the actual book one time. So I paraphrase what Derek's written, and I try to convey it with as much accuracy as Derek does in the chapter. But I encourage each of you, if you haven't already, to read the book yourself as well and read the actual chapter and see what insights may come to you. It can be extremely helpful in continuing forward on our path of Tao cultivation. Okay, so I'm going to start to sum it up now. So, focused intent, together with the clear idea of where to go and the courage to take action, allows one to experience the great power of the Tao. And that essentially is everything that I talked about today. One is, not letting ideas simply get stuck in your head, but to, it's not like I'm saying don't think about things. I mean, of course, ideas are, in a sense, a result of thought. But in order for those ideas to get out of our heads and to actually manifest into a reality, one where we can create a world of happiness and peace and balance and harmony, right now, in order to do that, it ultimately requires taking action. And, whenever you want to have a goal or something you want to accomplish, you have to sort of decide, in a way, what is the price that you have to pay for that, and decide to pay it. And then once you decide to pay it, the action, of course, is in paying it. And I don't mean with money. I mean with whatever it is that's required, whatever energy within you that's required to move forward. And the wonderful thing about energy is, like the Tao, it abounds everywhere. And the more you connect to it, the more it manifests. So moving forward with focused intent and taking action toward goals will bring help from all directions, as everyone and everything aligns up in a way that makes destiny come to fruition. It's an uncanny thing. But anyone who's experienced it, and I'm sure many of the people in this meeting have, knows what I'm talking about here. It's the sort of thing where seeing is believing. I think of in the Christian context when Jesus is resurrected and Thomas can't bring himself to believe it, and he says, until I stick my hands in the wounds and so forth, and of course, in the story, Jesus shows up and he does just that, and so it's like seeing is believing. Well, to me, that's sort of a context of that many people relate to, but I think it's the same sentiment here. The idea being that taking action, and determining what's the next place for you to go, and then taking action to actually go there. Once you do that, you see everything manifest in your life, and seeing makes you believe in a way. Just as Thomas needed to stick his hands in the wounds of Christ to believe, so too with us, it's like taking action in this invisible, untangible Tao, holding to that faith in the Tao. It's the same thing. Your faith becomes realized when you take action. So the key for tapping into the real power of the Tao is to not let ideas get stuck in the head by just thinking about them. Instead, we have to take action toward the direction envisioned. When this is done, the Tao changes circumstances and situations in ways that are frankly unbelievable until the actual experience of it occurs. And that's really what's conveyed in day 35 of the Tao of Joy Every Day. So, as always, I want to offer an invitation. If you've learned from the Tao of Joy Every Day, or any other study of the Tao, perhaps you'll want to share what you've learned with others by presenting on one of the 365 days in the book. It could be a chapter I've already covered, or one that I will in the future, or one that I did today. Certainly, the more we can sort of fellowship, so to speak, with each other, the more we can learn from each other. And learning from each other, that's really what this community is all about, coming together to share insights and to learn. So sharing the Tao insights you have learned with others will deepen your understanding. I can certainly say that's certainly true for me, and I hope it will be true for all of you as well. And so, as always, I want to end with a book recommendation, The Tao of Joy Every Day, a great book to use daily to help one study and learn the Tao teachings and put them into action. Okay, so there it was, Focused Intent, day 35, the Tao, our great image.
Alex, thank you so much for that presentation. This has to be one of my favorite topics because it has to do with bringing about actions that actually manifest one's true potential, and therefore achieving one's destiny and indeed one's fondest wishes as well. And I remember when I first began to study the Tao, coming across this concept, experimenting with it, I was astonished as to how well it worked for me. It's exactly as you said. All kinds of help came in all different directions. Once I got going, to the point where I was like thinking to myself, "What's going on here? This is too good to be true. I can't quite believe this is really happening." So, being kind of analytical type of personality, I decided, well, let me see if I can analyze this. And so the way that I tried to analyze it, at the time, I was also coming across this concept, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, which just means that you know this person, and that person knows a whole bunch of other people. That's each connection is a degree of separation, and in 6 degrees, you're indirectly connected to just about everybody. So I started thinking of the help that I received in terms of different degrees. For example, when I got started on a project, a lot of times I would discover that it was something in an area that I was already interested in, so that in the past I had already touched on it, I had already gathered some information, some resources on it, I had taken notes, I had maybe done some prototyping, so I forgot about this work that I had done before, But once I got going on a task, I discovered what I had done before, and it's a nice little discovery because it's exactly what I needed. It's exactly what I wanted. And looking at something is like, oh, I forgot I did this. Cool, I can make use of it now. So that was what I called like a 0-degree assistance because it came from myself in the past. Then I also saw that there was a sort of a 1-degree help. That is, people that I came across, people that I spoke to. A lot of times people will ask, hey, so what are you up to? What are you working on? And I would naturally tell them, this is my goal. And a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times they would say, oh, well, as coincidence would have it, I've got this little something that'll help you. So I get assistance from them. It's the 1-degree assistance. Now, there's also times when the people that I spoke with, they themselves don't have the knowledge or resources to help me on my path, but then they will say, oh, I know a guy, or my cousin, or my friend, or, I know this person, that person, oh, you should really talk to them. And, more often than not, they were right. It was someone who could help me, and it was, friend of a friend or acquaintance of an acquaintance, perhaps relative or family member of someone that I knew. So it was like a 2-degree separation. Now, beyond that, things started to get really murky because I could also identify help that came to me through no discernible connection whatsoever. No, I could not really tell how many degrees of separation that was. So I just kind of swept them all together under the N-degree assistance. And that's when things started to get sort of bizarre and fun and interesting and miraculous, all kinds of help that I was getting from all different directions. So then, having had that experience, I began to tell people, when they ask, well, what's the best way to get something done, whatever that thing is, my answer would often be, well, there's magic in getting started. If you get started, you come across this incredible power that you can tap into that'll help you along the way. But if you never get started, you will never know what it's like. So getting started is, to my mind, the best way to go. Now, that's the positive side of it. I've also, in my experimentation with the Tao, I've also had situations where I started on something and then I'm just stuck. I'm just like going nowhere. So I remember going to a particular Tao master and asking about this, providing all the details. And the Tao master said, well, it's actually pretty simple. He said, you previously, were successful tapping into this principle of the Tao because you began those projects or journeys on your own without really any expectations from anyone or anything. Well, having done that though, it's actually getting in the way because you are now going into a particular thing with expectations that there will be this massive infusion of assistance. When you have expectations, it tends to short circuit the whole process. So nothing happens. So following his advice, I redoubled my efforts, but this time with no expectations whatsoever, and he was right. Once again, assistance came from all different directions. Truly, the magic of the Tao, that once you get going, all kinds of things come to your aid. So I talked about this experience with a friend, and he lives in California now, but he is from the Midwest. He came from a small town in Illinois. And when I said this, when I described the beginning of my process, my experimentation, successes and failures, he laughed. He was laughing about it. He said, what you went through makes perfect sense. He said, let me tell you a little bit about my life. He said, I came from this small town in Illinois, and when I was a much younger man, I wanted to seek my fortunes on the West Coast, which is how I ended up in California. So he had nothing. He came from such a background of poverty that he didn't have any resources to draw from. So how could he fulfill his dream of seeking his fortunes on the West Coast? Well, he decided to just hit the road. And he said this was back in the days when it was still safe to hitchhike. So he hitchhiked across the country, eventually ending up on the West Coast. So he said, imagine if I had, left my home and then stood by the side of the road expecting help or someone to drive by and give me a ride. I could probably be there for a very long time. That is like going into something with expectations. So what I did instead was that I was resolved. I was determined that if I have to walk every step of the journey to the West Coast, I would walk absolutely every single step. So I began walking. And 5 minutes later, car came by, I stuck out my thumb, hitched a ride, and that was it. It accelerated my progress. I received assistance. So in order to tap into the Tao, you have to begin taking action, and you have to do that without any expectations in the same way that the hitchhiker would not expect that every car that he flags down is going to stop for him, giving him a ride to his intended destination. There's going to be times when a car stops by and then asking where you're going, finds out that he's actually going in the opposite direction, was about to make a left turn or right turn, so he can't really help. That's going to happen. There's going to be other times, there's going to be many times when cars don't stop at all, so you get no assistance. But there will be those times when you encounter really good people that will provide you with the assistance just when you need it the most. So never fails, happens all the time. So how do you succeed? How do you achieve? How do you manifest your dreams? Once again, my advice to everyone is kind of the same as before. Just get going. Just get started. There's magic in getting started, except now, with the advice from the Tao Master and the advice from my friend, I will qualify it and say, just get started with no expectations whatsoever of any assistance. And ironically, that's how you get tons and tons of assistance. So hopefully that makes sense. One of my favorite topics.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架深鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位顶传十一鞠躬，斜翻一鞠躬。Well done, everybody. Thank you so much.